Good afternoon. Today I have the honor of presenting the Livingston Faculty Recognition Awardee for 2007, Dr. Christy Jensen from Public Policy and Administration Department. Dr. Jensen's 20-year career here at CSUS has included scholarship, teaching, and leadership, including 2 terms as chair of the Faculty Senate. The background of the Livingston Award most of you know, but briefly for those who don't, this is an annual award and recognition given to a distinguished member of the CSUS faculty, one who's played an active role in the life of the university through his or her teaching, service, and creative and scholarly activities, and displayed a consistent and engaging collegiality and has shown strong commitment to students. The annual recipient is given the opportunity and responsibility to present the Livingston Lecture on a topic of interest and value to the entire CSUS community. The award's named after Jack Livingston, a professor I did not have the pleasure to meet, who was professor of government from 1954 to 1981. He was a teacher, mentor, scholar, colleague, and friend to many on this campus. But most important of all, he was an inspiration to a generation of CSUS faculty and students. So the award really means a lot. The award began in 1959 as a distinguished faculty convocation, and after Professor Livingston's death was renamed in his honor. Today we have several special guests here. Dr. Livingston's wife, Ethel Livingston, and her guests, Cleve, who's the son of Dr. Livingston, and Vivian, Rebecca, the daughter, George, another son, and Susan, and Esther Brandhaver, a friend. We also have Dr. Maynard Skinner, Dr. Jensen's husband. Dr. Jensen's speech today reflects on perhaps the future, or part of the future, of higher education in this state. Approximately 50 years ago, California developed a national model in the creation of the Higher Education Master Plan. Over the years, much has changed both in terms of our universities and our students, and with the demographics and need of the state as well. Dr. Jensen's address today will provide a series of interesting and vital questions and ideas about where we as Californians take higher education in the future. Her address today is timely as the California State University at Sacramento, the CSU system, and our partners at the community colleges and the University of California wrestle with new and old agendas about how we might best serve our students and the people of California. Dr. Jensen's speech today will be thought-provoking and timely. I have to call up the provost here. We have a couple of things to give to Dr. Jensen before her speech, so.
Actually, this is the fun part. Watch. This is really always, it feels great. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Livingston family and friends. Welcome, faculty. Special welcome to those of you who have been Livingston lecturers. Congratulations again on that honor. This is, and I just looked and welcome students. I think it's important that you are here. You learn, you take away important messages, you think, you act in the way I think that Jack Livingston wanted students to behave. It is good that you're here. And obviously, congratulations, Christy, on behalf of the president, and I'm delivering this for the president, but also on behalf of yours truly. I've known Christy since I first got here. I was thinking, were you on my search committee even? I think you may. Yep. Good. Christy is a good friend of mine. But this is a special occasion, and it has been. I first learned about it when I got here and have tried. I think I've gotten to every one of these lectures. It's very, very important. It's an important tradition, and I'm pleased to help carry it on. And on behalf of the university, on behalf of the president, Christy, and I won't say the amount, even it's over $100,000, but I won't say the amount. But Christy, in addition to the praise comes another award, if you will. Thank you.
And we have something to hang on your den wall. In recognition for her outstanding intellectual leadership, California State University, Sacramento honors Professor Christy Jensen on the occasion of her delivery of the John C. Livingston Annual Faculty Lecture 2007.
Thank you.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Christy Jensen.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the Livingston Lecture Committee for this honor, and I want to thank you, my staff and faculty colleagues, and the students who are here today for coming. I am most appreciative of this honor and especially eager for the opportunity at this point in my life and career to share some thoughts with you today. I came to this campus as a visiting faculty member in the government department in 1986, shortly after Jack Livingston died. And so, unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to meet him. However, because of my work with my colleagues in government and other colleagues of his across the campus, I feel I've come to know his values and his presence on campus, and I consider that a gift. And I am most appreciative, Mrs. Livingston, that you're here today as we continue to celebrate your husband's legacy on this campus. Thank you for coming. Before I continue with my prepared remarks, I want to say something about the original topic that I had thought about delivering or talking about when I was first alerted to the fact that I'd been nominated last spring. This was shortly after the Virginia Tech massacres. And the president of Virginia Tech talked about, on television, how Virginia Tech was a consensual community. And I thought that was sort of interesting. And I wasn't sure if I were to go to the campus and talk to everyone there that everyone would agree, but I was intrigued by the fact that the president would describe and want to describe the campus as a consensual community. And so I thought, that's a great topic. I will talk about building a consensual community at Sac State. And then over the summer, and especially at the fall Senate retreat, I became more and more aware of how hard some of our faculty colleagues are working, and in good faith working on the faculty's part to build a consensual community at Sac State. And so I decided to abide by the old adage, let actions speak louder than words. So my words today are going in a little bit different direction. And I just want to say that I hope when we're all here next year, at the time of the delivery of the Livingston Lecture, that I won't have any regrets about not having taken this opportunity to talk about a consensual community. But today I want to talk about us as faculty, and I want to talk about our responsibility to our students. I'm reminded today of my first involvement in higher education policy when I was a senior at UCD in 1966. And I had the opportunity to be the first chair of the experimental college at Davis. I had been appointed by the student body president as the chair of the Academic Affairs Council, and we thought it would be great to go to San Francisco State in the fall of '66 to learn about what an experimental college was like, and what was the agenda, and what were the things that were happening there. We had a passion for innovation and experimentation in what and how we learned. And we wanted our education to be relevant to the world we hoped to build. Relevant, I remember that word was just, relevant was the key word of that era. And the point I want to emphasize to all of you, or to myself, and remind myself too, is that I still remember the faculty members who were willing to join with us by using the 199 and 299 independent study vehicle for offering new and different educational experiences to us. Now, as a faculty member toward the end of my academic career, I want to bring this spirit of innovation and collaboration to my lecture this afternoon. John Kingdon, a political scientist at University of Wisconsin, has built upon some earlier work in organizational decision-making, which offers some provocative imagery and language for understanding the development of public policy. The original model he builds on used the metaphor of a garbage can to describe the messy, nonlinear, non-rational context of decision-making, in which streams of ideas, participants, solutions, problems, and politics swirl. A measure of unpredictability, serendipity, and chaos characterize this environment. Ironically, if I remember correctly, the authors used a college dean search process as a case study. Good, that's the only joke I'm gonna make. Kingdon's model builds on the garbage can and helps us understand the dynamics of movement through these swirling streams, adding the role of policy entrepreneurs, those who have the capital and are willing to risk it to advocate and move ideas, and policy windows, which describe opportunities to take action. For me, the dynamic of a solution in search of the right problem, let me say that again, a solution in search of the right problem, has always captured the genius of this work, which recognizes the importance of entrepreneurs, their crafting of ideas, and their awareness of timing in the policy process. Those who work in politics downtown, and I know some of you do, know about the boss's ideas, your boss in downtown, his ideas or her ideas, and are alert to possible new problem understandings as a way to move the boss's solution. That is a skill of a staff member in the legislature, is to know when the forces are converging at a time when a problem definition matches a solution that the member wants to push. And I want us to carry over our sense of understanding that sense of timing for our own ideas. Kingdon's language is valuable for diagnosing and understanding the environment and then strategizing to move those ideas and changes. In today's case, the policy soup of higher education. I want to encourage us as faculty to be policy entrepreneurs, and we have policy entrepreneurs here, to develop, modify, and shape ideas, and then watch for the policy windows to move them and secure the resources to make them real. This afternoon, I want to examine a couple of policy ideas in the soup, which I think call for our involvement as engaged faculty. And as I noted in my title to this talk, they're ideas which are important to the learning success of our students and our engagement with the region and community. One of these ideas relates to the importance of keeping young people involved in learning through the middle and high school years so that we receive engaged, confident, and ultimately successful students. Another relates to the challenges of keeping our students engaged in learning once we receive them. And the last two relate to meeting the needs of our region and community in graduate level education. Because I am and always have been a generalist with many interests in higher education, I hope you'll indulge me here with this wide spectrum of ideas. But before we talk about the specific ideas, following Kingdon, what does the current policy environment look like? Who are the players? What are the constraints and opportunities that seem to be at play? I want to talk about 6 aspects of the policy environment which I see as critical to this discussion. First are the pressures for accountability and a focus on measurable outcomes. We know this as assessment. But there are larger political forces across the spectrum asking us to be accountable for student success, both in terms of timeliness and the difficult one, the quality of their education. It feels to some, I know, as though there is a more transactional dimension to this, more emphasis on what business and industry want, what the taxpayers expect. And I acknowledge that we as faculty and our institutions have difficulty with that emphasis. I share some of those concerns, but I also think we need to understand that context that we are living in. The Spellings Commission, chaired by the mother of No Child Left Behind, the Secretary of Education in the Bush administration, it has been followed by federal legislative threats for a higher ed version of No Child Left Behind. And those are manifestations of the pressures at the national level. There's also state legislation. Luckily, we have colleagues like Nancy Shulock and the Institute for Higher Ed Leadership and Policy who have worked with legislators to help shape accountability in California in terms of broad goal achievement, avoiding the pernicious standardized testing requirements advocated in other states. And we are very lucky to have voices speaking in California in this different direction. A second element is a more subtle, but I think no less real shift in state legislators' mindsets from the segment privilege responsibility focus of the original master plan. You know, the community colleges are responsible for this type of education. They're responsible for basic skills. They're responsible for workforce preparation. They're responsible for preparing transfer students. The CSU prepares baccalaureate and some masters. The PhD is the research institution. That was the original kind of segment, what I call segment privilege responsibility, kind of focus of the original master plan. That has shifted to a student focus, which is how do our students experience the transitions from high school to community colleges to four-year institutions? Very different way of looking at the master plan. Policymakers are much less tolerant of what they see as finger pointing across the segments and turf protection by the segments. Very intolerant and impatient with that kind of a mindset, which has benefited us because UC kind of lived for a long time on being able to point to the privilege responsibility section in the master plan. And I think we have people in the legislature that aren't as patient with that kind of approach to looking at higher education and education in California. Third, and really at the heart of what I want to talk about, there is an increased concern for retention and successful graduation all along the way. The language of the pipeline, the educational pipeline. And if you haven't heard the statistics, let me give you some sobering ones. In California, if we think of a representative sample of 100 ninth graders, what happens to them in the educational pipeline? Well, 70 of that 100 graduate. 70 of those 100 ninth graders graduate from high school. 37 of them enroll immediately in college. 25 are still enrolled as sophomores. And 19 of that original 100 ninth graders graduate with a baccalaureate degree in 6 years. If we look at the 100 Latino ninth graders, the numbers are more depressing. 46 graduate from high school out of that 100. 26 of those 46 enroll in college, 17 of them in community colleges, and 9 of them in four-year institutions. And after 6 years, 8 have graduated with a baccalaureate degree. Complicating these kind of ethnic differences is the new gender gap. Not the gender gap that many of the women in this room challenged in the 1970s, but a new gender gap which is showing lower achievement by males across the board, significant across the board, but a source of great concern in the Latino and African American communities. I looked at the high school graduation data collectively for each ethnic group for our 8 counties in our service region, and in every instance but one, young women are graduating from high school at a higher rate, in some cases significantly higher than young men. First, let's look at it statewide. Of close to, in 2005-06, of close to 350,000 grads, 52% were women, 48% men. Of close to 125,000 Latino high school grads, 53% women, 47% men. Of a little over 25,000 African American grads, 54% women, 46% men. But then when we look at the completion of the A through G admissions requirements, which were met by about 36% of the statewide grads, there's an 8 to 10% difference between male and female college preparation across all ethnic groups. In Sacramento County, just a little bit more statistic, in Sacramento County, the hub of our service region in 2005-06, if you look at the 13,400 graduates, roughly equal in terms of male-female. But if you look at Latino and African American graduation rates in Sacramento County and A through G preparations, it's more depressing and of concern. Of 2,200 Latino grads in Sacramento County, 53% women, 47% young men. If you look at A through G preparation in that group, 57% women, 43% men. 1,800 African American grads, 55% women, 45% men. If you look at their A through G preparation, 64% women and 36% men. Sobering. We all know what this means in terms of our access mission, but this reality of the policy environment generates questions of when, where, and why are we losing these kids in the pipeline. A fourth characteristic of the policy, and I'll be obviously returning to this one in more detail, a fourth characteristic of the policy environment is the increasing deterioration of the vocational ed capacity in our high schools in terms of labs, equipments, qualified teachers. This issue has been captured by our building and trades associations in California, a growing involvement of business and industry reps who have gained the ear of the governor and the unions. They are working with Anthony Portantino, the chair of the Assembly Higher Ed Education Committee. They're working with Fabian Nunez, the Speaker of the Assembly, and they're working with Republican leadership. Strong voice being heard in the Capitol. An interesting aside is that part of the motivation for the industry activation on voc ed, or career technical education, the new term for this, was a consequence of being shut out in the last master plan review by the institutions of higher education. The institutes of higher education said vocational education, career technical education is not relevant to our mission. You don't need to be at the table. And those groups got mad and started organizing more powerfully on their own. There's actually a coalition of interests in this area that have called themselves Get Real. And the Get Real lobbying group has some good friends downtown that are making this issue. Fifth, there's a greater awareness, and this relates to the fourth, but a greater awareness of the need for workforce preparation, particularly in the sciences and technology, but also very generalized. A recent report from the Public Policy Institute of California speaks to California's growing deficits in college degree holders by generation. So think of this in terms of your own generation as you hear this. In the age group over 64, and there are some, California ranks 5th in terms of the percentage of its population that holds a baccalaureate degree. In the age group 45 to 64, which might include more of us, we rank 10th. I hope you can see where I'm going with this. Ages 35 to 44, we rank 16th. And in the age group 25 to 34, we rank 23rd in terms of the percentage of our residents that hold a baccalaureate degree. Those inclined towards some suspicion that the academy is being overtaken by a polytechnic thrust, I urge you to read this report. It's very sobering. And by the way, in talking to some people before, I was asked that when I post my talk on the Senate website to include some links to the reports and the data that I used in doing this, so I'll be sure to do that. Finally, in terms of the policy environment again, all of this is occurring in an environment of reduced resources, growing, I think, intersegmental tensions, increased criticisms from business leaders, faculty administration tensions in all the systems over executive compensation, low salaries. So overall, a turbulent environment, not at its most collegial, trusting, and respectful. So, what are these ideas and where are they coming from? And the ideas are coming from university research institutes, at UCLA, at our own Institute for Higher Education Leadership and Policy. They're coming from national think tanks like the Sloan Foundation, the National Science Foundation, the Council of Graduate Schools, from business and industry associations. They're coming from advocates for Latino and African American youth. They're coming from legislators. Our own Darrell Steinberg here in Sacramento is one of those that's very interested in these ideas. Senator Jack Scott, the chair of the Senate Education Committee. They're coming from other states, the Spellings Commission, as I mentioned before, at the national level. These folks are policy entrepreneurs. Some are good ones and some are bad, but they're responding to a policy environment of reduced and inadequate resources, increasing concerns about student success, and I think an increasing expectation that universities and faculty need to do things in different ways. And here is the crux of it, and the source of the challenge and the tension, and why we need to be involved. I say that again. There are increasing expectations outside of academia that we need to start doing things differently. And we need to be at the table and part of that conversation. Okay, the ideas. Let me try to move through these. I didn't time myself, but I think I still have my window, a lot of my window. The first idea is the notion of multiple pathways. Multiple pathways is a policy idea which emerges out of what many feel is the old, tired, either-or vocational education versus college prep tracking debate. Tracking seems to me to be very anti-American at its core, and particularly anti-Californian, I think, at this point in our history. Jeannie Oakes, director of the UCLA Institute for Democracy, Education, and Access, is the policy entrepreneur, or one of the policy entrepreneurs for this idea. Her model of multiple pathways comes out of a strong sense that we need to keep kids connected and motivated to learn, that we are losing too many in high school, that different children learn in different ways, and finally, that we need to prepare them for both college and career. Oakes argues that connecting academics to real-world context leads to higher levels of student interest and engagement, and hopefully can reduce high school dropouts. Under her scheme, students and families would have choices among various pathways, blending, in varying degrees, career technical education and college prep at the high school level. All high schools would be expected to provide rigorous curriculum, good advising in these pathways. And here's the key, that these pathways would have semi-permeable or permeable boundaries, which would allow students to evolve and grow through the high school years and still be prepared for maximum options. I don't think any of us in California would want to support the notion of students selecting a career technical education track at 9th grade and then be barred from ever being able to move into a university environment. So I think that the permeability of those boundaries is important. And that's the crux of some of the tension. The degree of permeability is part of the issue. How much career technical education is recognized by the four-year institutions for A through G requirements? Just to give you a sense of what we're talking about here, there are, in 0506, there were a little over 4,000 career technical education courses at the high school level, which had been approved by UC and CSU for A through G, meeting the admissions requirement. This is the piece that I think is interesting. Of those 4,000, about 50 were in history, social sciences, math, English, or languages. The remainder were in lab science, almost 700 of them, visual and performing arts, over 2,000 of them, and electives, about 1,200. So clearly kind of lopsided in terms of which parts of academia have engaged in this issue. The ideas of the multiple pathways are short on specifics right now, but that is precisely my point about faculty involvement in shaping these ideas. Some are recommending that all students take 1 or 2 career tech courses as part of their high school curriculum. As I understand it, Sacramento Unified School District has the goal of making all career tech options recognized as meeting A through G. I'm not quite sure how they're seeing doing that. Other states are going in what I think is the wrong direction of multiple pathways with impermeable boundaries. Not an attractive choice, I think, for California. An additional piece of this, which I'm sure is noted by our ed faculty, is the need for more teachers and a different kind of preparation for the teachers in this new career technical education field. We're talking about a different kind of teacher prep that we haven't done for a while. As evidence of the growing importance of these issues, I attended last month a forum in Davis, my home, for school board candidates sponsored by the career technical educators at the junior high school and high school levels. Never seen anything like this before. So that says something about the level of involvement and interest among the teachers at the high school and junior high level in this issue. So what are the challenges for us in the multiple pathways idea? As this policy discussion evolves, we will be asked to provide clearer signals about what success in post-secondary institutions requires beyond course completion. And we're starting to do that. We have our baccalaureate learning goals. We have in the majors various attempts to lay out what success is going to require, but those pressures are going to increase. As noted earlier, the permeability of the boundaries is a big one. What counts? Proponents are talking about more flexible programs such as dual enrollment between high school and community colleges as a way to keep these kids engaged. But what are the implications if somebody starts talking about community college CSU dual enrollment? What do we need to think about there? There are worries in some areas about compromising standards for college eligibility, and those need to be dealt with in a straightforward manner. And finally, the old kind of master plan segments elephant raises its head, because some argue that there are equity issues here and suggest that the implications of career technical education might not be equally relevant for the three segments. Translated, that means career technical education courses are going to be valued by the community colleges, maybe by the CSU, and never by the UC. And there's that whole intersegmental bugaboo that we're going to have to deal with in the process of looking at that issue in the future. So let me move to the second policy idea, which relates somewhat, and that is what I'm calling, is my term, thematic curricular initiatives. This is one of the nice things about giving the opportunity to do this lecture. You get to speak about your pet things. So thematic curricular initiatives. There's a common thread between this idea and the first, the notion of contextualized learning, which draws upon an integration or application of theory into an applied setting, which opens up interdisciplinary academics and different pedagogies which lend themselves to problem solving. Just as the UCLA folks have asserted that thematic learning hooks high schoolers, so do educators in the science and technology realm hope that these concepts will nourish and help retain university students. The STEM initiative, and many of you know about that, many of you know more than I do in detail about it, but the STEM initiative, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is sponsored by the National Science Foundation, and it's designed to encourage young people, including minority students, to enter the sciences. A national program, NSF has funded a STEM project on our campus, which draws across departmental college lines to build a truly interdisciplinary thrust. The Center for STEM Excellence on campus is led by Tom Landerholm in biology and Scott Gordon in engineering. And in looking at the notes from the STEM Pipeline Summit on campus last spring, some ideas stand out which make a direct link to the earlier UCLA multiple pathways work. The goal of capturing the imagination of kids early, the concern that some college requirements interfere with taking STEM coursework in high school, and an interest in strengthening career technical education programs as STEM pathways. Remember back the notion of CTE courses, which are A through G. There's some already hard work in the sciences. Although there are multiple goals and strategies for the STEM program, I am excited about the strategy of strengthening STEM education and research via a curricular component which envisions interdisciplinary teams of faculty teaching courses. Interdisciplinary courses where engineers, biologists might team to lead students through a learning experience which integrates a rigorous theoretical curriculum with critical thinking, writing, problem-solving skills is an exciting idea. Sound a bit like some innovations put forth a couple of years ago for Upper Division GE? Remember the recommendations about thematic, interdisciplinary 9-unit modules for Upper Division GE? If you didn't hear about it, it's because it was one of the ideas which came from a committee of our colleagues which didn't make it very far. something about the loss of FTES enrollments and loss of budget resources. Over the years, there have been a number of ideas floating in the soup about modifying GE to somehow integrate the depth of the major and the breadth of GE components. I remember discussions of GE modules, which I'm thinking of as thematic curriculum, specially designed around different clusters of majors, which might contextualize the learning. In one stimulating discussion, I can't remember whose idea it was, but I remember someone talking about an English class for business majors, which would, for example, assign the Merchant of Venice as a reading assignment. We need to watch what our STEM colleagues are talking about and find ways to learn from them. I personally think that general education, GE, creates a great opportunity for the kinds of contextualized learning while maintaining theoretical and classic rigor, similar to what the STEM initiative promises and offers. So what are these challenges? We need to confront the FTES budget issue. We need to confront it. We need to find ways to encourage experimentation and collaboration across departmental and college boundaries. I've often been amused and frustrated by that question on the new course proposal form. What other departments have courses that might be threatened by your new proposed course? Of course, it's not worded that way, but the thrust is, how do I work around this description to get it approved for our department rather than reject it? There's little incentive to acknowledge commonalities and build coursework in areas to take advantage of the strengths that we have here. We need to explore structures like the graduate group concept at UC Davis, which is a mechanism for developing and supporting interdisciplinary theme-based learning. We need to find more time to talk and hang together, and I'll speak more about that in a few minutes. I'd like to turn my attention for the last few minutes to policy ideas pertaining to graduate education and the link of graduate preparation to regional and community needs, a specific thrust of the proposed master plan. This third big idea is, what I call a big idea, is the Professional Masters of Science degree. The Sloan Foundation and more recently the Council of Graduate Schools have been the policy entrepreneurs at the national level. Professional Science Masters are an innovative approach to earning a Master of Science degree that is designed to prepare students for science careers in business, government, and nonprofit organizations. Several CSUs are actively developing PSM programs within the next 3 years, which will be implemented in a variety of fields, including bioinformatics, biostatistics, biotechnology, clinical project management, computational science, ecological economics, environmental science, and forensics. The 2-year degree programs are designed around 3 major elements: interdisciplinarity, that fuses scientific fields at a level of depth and complexity hard for undergraduates to achieve. Astrophysics, for instance. In other cases, the fusion may relate to data collection and the need for the use of data and linked to computer or information sciences. And in others, the integrated study may include training in management, law, ethics, or other professional domains. A second characteristic is a strong theoretical applied integration, and a third is a research emphasis, which includes an internship linked to a thesis, in contrast to the traditional Master of Science with a laboratory research-based thesis. I think there's tremendous potential here, and I wanted to specifically mention the new Center for Practical and Professional Ethics, headed by Chris Bellin in philosophy here, in terms of partnering in some of these kind of programs. The Sloan Foundation is providing seed money, and anticipated congressional appropriations include $37 million this year for the support of PSMs. Our campus has a planning grant and a core of faculty, including Hussein Partovi in physics and astronomy, and Suzanne Lindgren, among others, in biological science, who I see as some of our local policy entrepreneurs. While the current emphasis is on science, mathematics, engineering, and technology, the Council of Graduate Schools is also talking about other fields of study for future work, a professional Master of Arts in social science and the humanities. I think that some of the work that Cheryl Osborne is doing in putting together the gerontology masters, some of the work by my colleagues in PPA, Ted Lasher with the Judicial Administration Program, Rob Wasmer and Jaime Alvajai in business, in the urban land development are promising in those kind of directions. But there are other possibilities too, and I know that you can imagine them in your own minds. So what are these challenges? Well, the FTS budget issues rear their head again, but this time I suggest there is a whole is greater than the sum of its parts possibility. Disciplines with very small graduate enrollments have the opportunity to partner with other academic programs to build enrollment. I think there's a real potential there. And I'm glad that I don't think, and maybe I shouldn't even bring it up because I'm not sure that everybody's with me on this, but I don't think we need to fight the old kind of what I considered the bogus artificial war which was going on when I first came here about the real university and others. You know, it was like, I won't say which college was the real university, but there was the real university and then there were all the rest of the colleges. I think that we can support, for example, in PSMs and in STEM, the highest levels of scientific work, and then supplement them with what Sloan people call plus courses, which may include business, public policy, ethics, et cetera, in that coursework. The final idea, and I won't have as much time to spend on this, but is the applied doctorate. Most of you are aware that the EdD program, an independent doctoral program, which the legislature authorized several years ago to prepare future education leaders in K through 12 and community colleges. The impetus for this program came from our educational faculty statewide, the chancellor, but also the professional associations in the education field. There are similar efforts in other professional areas such as audiology, physical therapy, nursing, where the UC PhD research emphasis has left a void in public higher education for professional development. In some fields, the doctorate is emerging as the required entry-level degree. So when people, primarily from UC, but also our own CSU colleagues, note the master plan designation of UC as the doctoral granting institution and question our involvement, I feel it's important to recognize that the understanding of doctoral education in the 1960s, when the master plan was developed, was limited to the research PhD degree. The professional degrees and the interdisciplinary understandings of theory, action, integration were in the infant stages at that time. Just as the EdD and Ed Leadership has emerged as a multidisciplinary academic program, some of the future opportunities may also deserve our exploration. I feel that the CSU and our campus is uniquely capable. I personally like the word nimble. I think, in my experience looking at the other large system of higher education, we are nimble. Our faculty are connected to the community, are in touch with the needs in the disciplines, are in touch with how their disciplines are evolving. And I think that we all know examples of that. So what are these challenges? I've only got, I think, 2 on this one. To work out workload, dissertation, guidance issues. There's lots of workload things in terms of applied docs and things that need to get worked out. But I think the other challenge is to lobby for the legislative funding to support these programs. Charging private sector fees will hurt access. So we have to find and generate more sources of public support for these kind of programs. So we have some big ideas. There's a strand, I hope, that I've developed which draws them together in terms of multidisciplinarity, thematic curricular offerings, action theory integration, new pedagogies, contextualized learning, applied research opportunities, multiple pathways. So how do we shape, support, and move these ideas? There are barriers both within us and in our culture, and there are also institutional barriers. Faculty are trained to be analytic critics. We tend to do our most important work in solitude. It's been my experience that we are best at pulling things apart and critiquing ideas and plans and processes. In fact, For many of us, it's more fun to wait until somebody else has put out the plans and processes and ideas so that we can engage in our analytic critical skills. And I think that becomes a habit. This shouldn't be surprising. This is how we were trained in our preparation as academics. We are less well trained to build collaboratively. And sometimes we're resistant to change, just sometimes. When we use the appeal of protecting quality, we owe it to our students to be sure that it's not just a cover for protecting the status quo. So I've just blown my wad of goodwill with it. The cultural habit around critiquing, I think, is accentuated by the reactive nature of shared governance, frankly. In many areas of shared government, we find ourselves being reactive. We find ourselves advising after the fact, consulting after the fact, after the issue, and thus the choices and the solutions have been framed by others. But the curriculum is our responsibility, and it is clear that we have some efforts underway which need our support, I believe, and which we need to continue to build. We need to position ourselves to be defining these opportunities. The incentives when resources are strained are to protect and defend. FTES protection becomes the requisite to protection of faculty positions. Experimentation with curriculum means risk. Collaboration is risky. Sometimes it feels that anything but marginal adjustments to curriculum is deadly. The public policy literature suggests that when faced with resource cuts, organizations and institutions, not surprisingly, pull in the reins, become exceptionally formulaic and restrictive. I feel this is precisely the wrong mindset for us to take. So, how do we collectively break out of these bad habits? I have 7 ideas. Not like the 7 habits. What is Steve Covey's 7 habits of effective people? I just thought of that. Okay, 7 ideas. Some good ones, some big ones, some small ones. First, I think, and I've said this before, but I'll use this bully pulpit to say it again. We need to insist that the administration develop policies and practice to hold harmless departmental and interdepartmental collaboration and experimentation in the curriculum. We need to find ways to encourage experimentation. And the only way you can do that is to not make certain departments so darn afraid of losing FTS. So we need to find ways to hold harm. Second, we need to advocate for budget allocations or budget structures which can support interdisciplinary work. I remember in some work I did more than 10 years ago on the strategic plan with Nancy, there was an institution that actually set aside a part of their core academic budget to support interdisciplinary work. So that's the second idea. Some of you will remember the once a semester research conference with faculty. I think we need to reinstitute that. I think we need to get to know each other again in an interdisciplinary, in an appreciative, in a celebrating what each other brings to the academic endeavor. So that's one thing I feel really strongly about, is reinstituting that once a semester conference. I don't know why it went down the tubes, but it wasn't, well, okay, enough said. We need to learn from each other. I think that we need to involve ourselves, and this is a departmental and disciplinary commitment, but we need to involve ourselves with intersegmental discussions in our disciplines. We need, for example, high school science teachers, community college science teachers, and CSU science teachers in our region need to be talking across the board. I think we should ask the Senate to have our curriculum committee and our GE committee look at ways we can create incentives, identify possibilities for supporting interdisciplinary work. Sixth, I think we need to join with other faculty to educate legislators about these needs and the importance of resources. Legislators see us as only concerned about compensation, more for us and less for them. And these are important issues, believe me, but they're not the only ones. And those of us that work in the legislature know that that is tended to be their understanding of what faculty are about. Maybe this is a good time for the Senate to appoint a Government Affairs Committee. Not to go lobby, lest Phil Garcia jump out of his seat. I'm not suggesting the faculty are going to be go down independently in lobbying, but a Government Affairs Committee to watch the policy environment downtown and keep the faculty up to date on the movement of these ideas and issues. We have people on this campus like Bob Buckley, Chris Miller, Tom Krabacker, and others who are watching what's happening in the legislature. I think the faculty as a whole needs to know what's moving on these ideas. And finally, we need to support one another to build new ideas which can engage our students, keep them excited about learning, and help them see the importance of what they are learning to their future lives. Thank you for listening, and I would love to engage in conversation about these ideas with any of you who are interested. Thank you very much.